Parashas Shlach. This is the one. This is the Parsha. This is the. It all comes down to this week's Parsha, because we are in Galus today because of this week's Parsha, 3,000 years later, and remarkably, people still don't exactly quite get the message. They think that it was a one-time episode. We made a mistake. God closed the door. Galus, and the story. Not much we can do till Mashiach comes. And in fact, the clock is ticking from this week's Parsha. It's ticking. They made a drastic mistake, and now the rest of history, for the most part, has been to rectify that chet. And we are here today because we have not here in this house. We are here in this house tonight because we have partially rectified that chet by trying. We're trying, Bezrat Hashem, and everybody else who's not in this house tonight has got big problems. It's a good thing you came tonight. Anyhow,
I knew it before. You were in the group.
The first thing to point out that if you look at the parsha and the pasuk, the combination of just two words together in one, parsha and pasuk, right? The pashuk. So if you look at them together, basically, that you will see. Just look at the whole thing, the story. You'll see the Kosh Baruch Hu, they never really rejected the land as the land itself. They weren't saying it wasn't a beautiful land. They weren't saying that it wasn't filled with fruits and all kinds of wonderful things, and it was a great place to be, and what a fantastic gift. They just said that we can't go up. There's all kinds of perushim as to why they thought that way, and many were L'Shem Shemaim, and many that make a lot of sense, and perhaps the one that's least known, but is very, very important to point out because it is the most logical one that they could have relied upon. And there's a very important limud in that for everybody else for history, and that is the fact that we say Tznu Ozlo Lukim, right? We have a pasuk, and the Zohar explains what that pasuk means. Give strength to God means that basically, even though Kosh Baruch Hu doesn't require us for anything, He has all the strength in the world. In essence, He's beyond anything we can ever do for Him. He doesn't need us at all. He did as a chesed. He maintains us as a chesed. The Gemara says that all that Hashem does for us is tzedakah. It's all charity work, basically, and even going through the world to come. It wasn't necessary. And His essence is that He gives good, but there's no imperative. That's a very important klal that they point out on all levels, Pshat, Ramesh, Drus, and Sod. But He will, for the sake of making our lives meaningful, He will act as if He does need us. He will act as if the things that we do make a difference in the end, and that they do have consequences, because otherwise life stops being real for us in the end. There's no meaning anymore to the things that we're doing. So, as a result of that, the Kosh Baruch Hu will act strong based upon our averas. No, let me flip it around over there. He will get strong based upon our averas against us, right? He'll act weak based upon our averas, and He'll act strong based upon our mitzvahs. You do mitzvahs, you draw light into the world. The Kosh Baruch Hu will overcome evil, and evil will be destroyed, and good things will happen for good people, and bad things will happen to bad people, the way it's supposed to be, the way it makes sense logically to us, right? If we don't do the things we're supposed to do, then Kosh Baruch Hu will act as if He's weak, and therefore bad can prosper. And it all works out. It's all din. There's nothing out of sync over here. It's just that the way the Kosh Baruch Hu orchestrates it is different. Now, when things are going well, as Rashi points out in Parashas V'yelech, that Hester Panim doesn't mean that Kosh Baruch Hu is not involved in history. Hester Panim means that Kosh Baruch Hu acts in history in such a way as you can't always see what He's doing and why He's doing it that way. The Hester Panim is the connection between the cause and effect. So therefore, things can appear random. Things can appear, mercilessly, as if it's happening in a way that doesn't make sense and not logical. And as a result of that, it's like it's a pella. It's hard to understand. But for example, that if God forbid a situation to happen, there's a 50-car pileup on the highway that seems totally random because people were just driving home that day and some guy didn't flick his blinker, whatever, and he changed lanes too quickly and it caused a massive pileup 50 cars later, and God forbid there's deaths and all kinds of serious accidents. It looks like people just got thrown together randomly, and had they not gone home that day at that time, then they would have been spared the consequences. But this crazy Meshuggah who drove the way he drove and caused all the problems, right, he's the cause of all these things. And the reality is not true. Everybody who got injured, everybody who, God forbid, died, whatever the case may be, it was their moment, it was their time, it was their injury, whatever it was, Kosh Baruch Hu planned it. The difference is going to be when things are going well. and things are going right, and we're doing what we're supposed to do the proper way, everybody will die according to the way they're supposed to die, in a nice, pleasant, whatever the case be, not say pleasant, but it'll happen in a way that makes sense. And it's logical. The person will die maybe in their sleep. The person will die, God forbid, of a heart attack, whatever. But it'll be clear that's why they died. The reason will be clear, and it won't look random at all in the end. People won't, people need to get injured. Will instead get injured on the job or some other place. It makes a lot more sense. It won't look so random in the end. But everybody, things happen to that person is because that was the way it was meant to be. But we lost the schus to make the connection. And as a result of that, it was thrown together in one big mess. It looks like very, very chaotic. And the result is going to be that people lose their emunah, they lose their faith, they have difficulty dealing with the reality. So it's a schus to have a cause and effect relationship in such a way that we can see how it's working, working in terms of divine providence. So, but the main point over here, Baruch Hu makes it specifically that the Jewish people do the right thing, then He will act strong. And that's certainly important when it comes to miracles. When it comes to situations like the one we're living in right now, which we just take totally for granted. No, we don't, but people do take for granted, or we don't appreciate as much as we can appreciate, and that is the fact that we're surrounded by hundreds of millions of people who have, and I have to always point this out, even just for myself on a daily basis, so spare me for the fact, or forgive me for the fact that I'm repeating this thing all the time, but it's such an important point to always remember that we are surrounded by hundreds of millions of people who have the bravado, the chutzpah, the money, everything they're required to, and the will, for sure, to wipe us off the face of the earth. And there's no logical reason. IDF, IAF, all this is combined together. Just give every Arab a bayonet and tell them, charge. You couldn't shoot them down fast enough. They would come, the damage they would do would be horrific in the end. They would sneak through. The fact that we have such relative peace, considering the situation, the circumstances, is nothing but a phenomenal, daily miracle that you have to thank Kadosh Baruch Hu on a daily basis, because it could change at a moment's notice. You just see what's going on in the countries around us, how fast things are changing. Things are changing very, very quickly. And we know at a moment's notice, a war could begin just like that. Kadosh Baruch Hu does this all the time historically. That's why people who feel that the arrival of Mashiach, if it's not happening quickly today, it can happen tomorrow, because it takes time for there's red tape and there's processing, there's panim and all these different things to go through. It just takes time, before Mashiach can finally arrive. And of course, it's not like that way b'chlal. Kadosh Baruch Hu can do it in 1 second, and the things that actually make His arrival possible can be in the works already for dozens of years, if not hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, working behind the scenes. The fact that you can't see how the events of today. That's why, for example, just to go off on a tangent here a little bit, so we can forget our way and totally forget the point of this conversation. But when I was in New York not too long ago, a big thing, the States actually, but the big thing was this guy, Harold Camping, who, probably didn't hear about him over here. I also had not heard of him before I was in New York, riding a subway, and I look over to my left over here, this nice, beautiful, glossy, advertisement for the end of days on the New York subway. So I thought maybe they're raising the price of tickets or something like that, What do you talk about the end of days? On the subway over here? So this guy, Harold Camping, who made a prediction before, but he was wrong the first time, made a different prediction. And I think it was May 21st or something like that.
He's predicting the world would come to an end?
He was predicting the world would come to an end.
I remember,
and he had people selling.
Christian.
Remind me of Shabbatai Tzvi thing, actually. He had people selling off all their property, everything, just like totally supporting him and giving them money to send this stuff around the world. The people should know that the end is coming. Of course, they made a fantastic mockery. He took over the news for quite a while. And the day of and the time of was like, people didn't believe it, but they're all waiting to see that maybe there might be something there we don't know about. For me, it was like, this guy's a fraud, because he has no idea what the Bible's even about, really. He has no idea how gematria is working. He's working on some kind of gematria based upon psukim, and it's a complete joke to think that this guy had any credibility whatsoever, but that's how naive people could actually be. And he's $80 million richer for it, so actually it wasn't such a bad idea after all. I'm thinking of doing the same thing myself. Yeah.
But he spent a lot of money to do this.
Yeah, but he still had some change left over.
Yes,
apparently. Right. And now the only camping people are outside because they have no houses anymore. Okay. Right? They're living in tents instead.
So he can support them.
The Rambam says that, and this is totally a tangent, right? But somehow I know it comes back to the shir. The Rambam says that the whole point of Christianity, it's a famous Rambam, right? I'm sure heard before, was to spread monotheism. They didn't quite get it right either, for that matter. But they got better than paganism because there was like 10 gods and 15 gods, and Zeus, of course, throwing his lightning bolts and things like that. And there was a god for every phenomenon in life that we couldn't explain. It was early science. Basically, that's the way they explained the world. That's because that's how they compartmentalize the whole thing. Because once you give a title to a force, and call it a god, so you can bring a sacrifice down and be bite off, right? So it was a way of conveniently controlling the world. Right, today we just have air conditioning things on the wall called climate control. It's much cheaper than sacrificing animals on a daily basis, right? But it only affects the weather inside, not so much the weather outside. But that's what man is always about, controlling the environment, controlling the world. So Christianity was a step better. They still divided them into three somehow, right? But at least it brought...
Catholicism,
Protestantism
doesn't.
Well, they watered it down eventually. They said not for this stuff already, but but it got watered down to eventually have all kinds of different variations of the entire thing. But they did what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to bring monotheism to the whole world, elevate mankind, educate the world, and they would have done this, by the way, by sending emissaries to Eretz Yisroel as they were doing at one point in time, right? And that would have impacted them and brought that philosophy back to where they were where they were living, and monotheism would have spread the rest of the world. And there would be no Aborigines today someplace in Australia, right? That's where they are.
Yeah.
And people are cannibals and things like that. The world would become a much more civilized place. But we didn't do that. We failed at our job of being Or L'Goyim. So therefore, instead, the message had to get out. So Christianity came along in all its glory and crusades and pogroms and you name it, from day one until the very end. Nothing but killing and murdering and spilling of blood in the name of God. And then comes Islam to finish up the job as well, to do their part in the entire thing. But it was a way of spreading this idea of one godness to the whole world. What a lousy way of doing it, but that's what happens. You don't do it the proper way. It happens through a backdoor way at the end. So, that's a big picture. Who would have thought of it? That's a big picture approach to Christianity. The Rambam's approach over here, and it makes perfect sense. We won't go into why it had to happen that way and how it makes sense. But he's looking at the entire picture because he knows. We're all supposed to know, and that is that things don't happen by coincidence and things don't happen by accident. There's a reason why, if a negative event occurs that we spoke about before, it's only the flip side of a positive event that was supposed to have occurred but didn't occur. All the energy in creation is there for the sake of building geula and redemption for the Jewish people. It's all there for us to bring about tikkun all rectification of the world. If we don't bring about the rectification, that energy doesn't simply evaporate and go back to Shemayim. It's there in the world. So therefore, Kodesh Baruch Hu leaves it there. And whoever takes it will use it whatever way they want to, in whatever way they see best. And usually it's an abuse. It's an abusive result of a negative event. So we won't go through all the examples of this historically, how this is so true. And you look at it, it's incredible how accurate this is. So as a result of that, the bottom line is that when the Kodesh Baruch Hu, see, I lost my place already. Harold Camping, when he does this thing, when the whole world gets in this Armageddon mode, just like Y2K changed the way people thought. The Twin Towers. I mean, people don't realize Y2K was the precursor to the Twin Towers. As much as Y2K seemed like a bluff, it didn't pan out and become what people thought it was going to become. Still, it changed the world. It was a step along the way that eventually resulted in the destruction of the Twin Towers. You go even so far as to say that had we got the message of Y2K, the Twin Towers might have been necessary.
What's the message of Y2K? I don't see the connection.
Because I'll send you the file.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll send you the file. I wrote a whole book about this.
It was about the computers would not work. So
but Y2K stands for the word Yabok, Yud Beis Kuf, which is the river that Yaakov crosses over to become Yisrael. And that's what history is all about. But it's like too much of a thing to go right now. It's too long, too many details. I can send you the file, and you can read for yourself inside. Or you can buy the book, which is even better. But
plug.
That's a good one.
A good plug.
It really started in 2001,
yes,
which is when the Twin Towers fell.
right.
Not 2000. Everybody was saying 2000, our computers are going to go out.
Right.
But really, it was 2001.
No, but they had to go from 1999 to 2000. That was the big change, right?
For computers.
For computers, right.
For the 21st century,
Right.
it really didn't start in 2001.
Okay. And therefore?
That was in line to the year that the Twin Towers fell.
Okay. Oh, so you said it was a turning point.
Precursor.
Okay, beseder. But the point that I just want to focus on over here is that when something like this happens, whatever happens historically, there's a message in it. If this guy is in a sugar running around spreading this, but it's impacting the world. Meis Hashem Haisa Zos, he needs my name. Right? This is the rectify from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that which catches our attention and makes us stop and think about what's going on. And this guy had people talking Armageddon. All the major news stations and newscasters and interviewers were all talking Armageddon. They're making a big deal about this thing. We're all laughing, go, ha, ha, ha. The whole thing's so funny and ridiculous. And people, when they laugh, there's a little nervous laughter too, to some degree, because you never know. You never know, right? But a big picture thing is, so why? Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu make this happen at this time and bring out this thing in the world? There's an energy there. Even crazy people don't get their ideas unless it's in the world to be thought about. They don't just pull it from nowhere, because Baruch Hu floats these things into Maaseh Bereshis, and people take advantage of it. So it always starts at the fringes first, and then moves its way inward towards the more traditional mainstream crowd. So he's the fringe, and he's talking about this, but it's a message at a time of history with everything else going on. And don't forget the fact that 5772 is a year that's important both to Kabbalah, and 2012 it comes up and with other calendars. It's like on one hand, it's like, do we pay attention to things like this? And the answer is yes, to some degree. Not because they knew something that we don't know, or they had some of it prophetic insight into the history that we didn't get, but because it's hashgacha pratis. That's the bottom line. The hashgacha pratis. Something about it. They're tapping into something. Even the weirdos, even the strange people, they're tapping into some energy. And if it's an energy in the world, it's there for some reason, for the sake of building geula. So don't take him seriously, but take the message seriously. Things change quickly. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tries to warn us. And first he tried to warn us through the prophets. Right? He gave us Nevi'im, he gave us Nevuah, and they left that behind, by the way. They may be gone thousands of years, but their prophecies are there to be read today. That's the most incredible thing. It's like people deal with the Nevuah, the book of Nevi'im, they deal with it like Kili was only Shach 2,000 years ago, totally forgetting they were talking about now. Right? They spoke back then about today. So if any time was relevant to read Nevi'im, it's now. And the proof, we don't do it. That's the proof. Because the Sitra Achra will always attack the thing we should be doing and make it seem so meaningless and unimportant. So we'll say, who needs it today? Because that's exactly what he wants you to say. Because if he gets you to say that and believe that, you won't do it, and the gula gets pushed off. Some people say, Eretz Yisroel, not a mitzvah today, right? That's exactly what he wants you to say, and what he wants you to believe. What about the technical reality? Okay, there's a discussion here. You can bring up the Rishonim, the Achronim, different Shatim, Hashkafa. You can discuss this thing for hours upon hours, whether or not there's actually a derisive mitzvah today to be living in Israel. It's actually irrelevant to some degree. Because David HaMelech said the following thing, Ata takum terchein Tzion. You will get up and you will show mercy to Tzion. Bell should go off. You heard that word Tzion? And bell should go off. Why? Because Tzion is not a name we use for the Jewish people in everyday life. Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yaakov, right? The Jewish people, Am Yisrael. Those are the Tzion is the name used by Nevi'im for a very special state of existence of the Jewish people. It's talking about the Jewish people as a nation living on the land with the base of Mikdash, with the Torah. Everybody's a believer. That's the ultimate state of Klal Yisrael, Tzion. When the Nevi'im refer to Tzion, right, it's talking about the shleimus of Klal Yisrael. When you hear the word Tzion, you go, whoa, what's that? Tzion? It should open your eyes and open your ears. And the first question that comes out all the time is, what do you mean? Rachmanis, right? Mercy? Tzion will need mercy. I always thought that mercy was until Tzion came into existence, but the Jewish people were developing. Tzion is the completion. Well, no, because Tzion is a work in progress. This takes thousands of years. And there'll come a time, we'll be very close to the end, we'll still need mercy. And here we are, very close to the end, living in the land, and we still need mercy, just like the Pasuk said. Oh, that's the real clue, because now, David HaMelech said, in case you weren't smart enough to get the first part of the message, let me fill you in. I'm talking about the end of days. Whenever they are. It could be my time, your time, another time, but it's going to be the end of days. Because the appointed time will have come. right? And we'll need mercy, and we'll have to get it. And how will we go about getting it? So the pasuk says, and completes this, and again, the Sitrachra, he lets you sing that pasuk. You can sing that pasuk all you want, because that pasuk goes nowhere in the end. It's only a passive description of a reality that's going to have to be. But there's no instructions what to do. It's the next pasuk that tells you what to do, that validates and verifies and strengthens the previous pasuk and says, okay, now here are the instructions. Right? This is what it has to be, and here are the instructions. And what are the instructions? Ki ratu avdechas of neha v'zafra yechenenu. Because your servants, they want, right, her dust, they cherish her stones, and they cherish her dust. And that's the complete response to this week's parsha. That pasuk is the response to this week's parsha. Because Baruch Hu says to Bnei Yisrael, he says they despised the land. They despised it. And they never said we despise it. They never attacked the land per se. They came back and said it was a beautiful land. They had nothing but compliments. They brought back beautiful fruit to say, look at the fruit. You know, you price the fruit today. If someone came to your front door and said, look, huge grapes like this. Wow, how much they cost? Free. Just move into the land and plant them for yourself. The land has this fantastic capacity to grow fantastically big fruits. Right? And beautiful, fantastic. They didn't criticize the land. They criticized the situation, the matzav. The land swallowed its inhabitants, meaning the people living there. The land wasn't, they were burying people nonstop. Yeah, but they didn't say like, big mouth opening up like Korach, right? And saying, I'm hungry, throw another person in the land eats it. It's a metaphor, right? It's a euphemism. They're talking about the fact that people died there, but primarily they're scared. Why? Because the pasuk says, Tnu oz l'Elokim, give strength to God. And the problem with Dor HaMidbar from the beginning until the very end was a lack of self-confidence. And they said that, you can't argue with the miracles that God has done for us in the past because that's history. You can't go back and rewrite history. People try, but you can't. It's not truthful. We cannot deny the miracles that Kosh Baruch Hu has done up until now. But the future miracles, we can question. How do I know Kosh Baruch Hu will fight and defeat the 31 kings? He's done what he's done up until now, but we have 31 kings on the agenda coming up, and that will take fantastic miracles. Miracles take schuyot. Tznu oz l'Elokim means that our schuyot give a Kosh Baruch Hu the strength to overcome the bad guys. So we're saying we don't believe that we have the capacity as a nation to have enough schuyot to guarantee that Kosh Baruch Hu will be strong in this battle against the Malachim and the Canaanim, and therefore we might lose this war. If we lose this war, not only will we die in the process, and it's painful, but what a chil Hashem is going to be. Like Moshe says, what a chil Hashem is going to be, not to succeed. So they came back and they had a svara. There's a logic to this whole thing. Kodesh Baruch Hu has established Ma'aseh Bereshis in such a way that it depends upon us. There's a logic to it. There's only one difference. There's only one problem. That's true if you're going to try and accomplish something on your own that God has not told you to do in the end. But once the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, go, I'm giving you the land, then it's like there's no cheshbon anymore. Whatever it's going to be is going to be. Did you have a cheshbon in Mitzrayim? Did you think for 1 second that in Mitzrayim you had the schuyot to survive, the shibud, and the kamah to be free from Mitzrayim? No, Kodesh Baruch Hu did anyhow. Why? Because it was avtacha, a promise made to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov back hundreds of years ago that guaranteed our getting out, regardless of where we were holding. Because Baruch Hu wanted out of his way to be mizaka us to get more schuyot, even though he had no obligation to do so. So that was their logic. But the Torah says, in spite of the fact they may have had a svara, they may have had some kind of logic, there may have been some kind of Lashem Shemayim to the whole thing, the bottom line is the moment you don't want to go, the moment you're not makayim the pasuk, you ratzu dechas of neah, forget about technically, can I make aliyah? I can't make aliyah. I got mother in the hospital, God forbid, or I got debts I have to pay off, and this thing, and that, or I got fears, whatever the reasons a person's not. But what's your ratzon? Where's your ratzon? How do you feel about the makom itself, the place itself? Are you driven towards it? Is your heart there? If it is, good. The rest we'll have to work out in detail. But the moment you don't want it, you don't cherish it, it's not at the top of your agenda of dream places to go and to live, the moment it's not the case, You are perpetuating the chet of the Meraglim and personally holding off the galus, the gula. Personally. Extending the galus. That's not my vort. That's Ram's vort. He says exactly that. And he's not just the only one. I mean, it's so obvious. So many Meforshim say the exact same thing, and you have to be very careful. So there's different ways of trying to come to terms with how to rectify the situation. Obviously, because I just came back from Chutz La'aretz, and I can tell you, it's very hypnotic. It's very appealing. I have to remind myself what I'm doing there half the time, and you stand up to talk to people and want to deliver an address and say, you guys have to get out of here as soon as possible, or start thinking about that. And you hear the words come out of your mouth in this environment that seems so hospitable, although less so every single day. There's no question about it. You stand back and look at the big picture. There's a lot of potential for things to change at a moment's notice against the Jewish people is very clear. It's very clear cut. But there's something we have to be able to appreciate by the Meraglim that's very important because it has relevance even to today. I mean, obviously, not even. It is the chet that we're rectifying. There were 10 things the Jewish people did to anger Kosh Baruch Hu. The 10th was the Meraglim. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. People to realize that's the tikkun. That's the thing we are fixing up every single mitzvah, every single moment. The Arizal says a very interesting thing. And it's right. It cuts right to the heart of the matter. He brings down in Shar HaGilgulim that when Yosef went down, and it says, when the Pasuk says, all that happened to Yosef will happen to Tzia. There's a mirror, the Gematria of Yosef and Tzia are the same thing. There's a mirror relationship between Yosef and Tzia, and so Yosef's life becomes like the paradigm for the future of the Jewish people until the end of history. He's tied up with that. This is why Mashiach ben Yosef is so crucial to the Gula process. So, one of the most curious things in the story of Yosef and his brothers is how Yosef goes about trying to bring the tikkun to everybody who was involved in Mechiras Yosef. So they come down to Mitzrayim, and he hears that they're there, and he responds to it by calling them Meraglim. Now, we've spoken about before in the past what the word Meraglim actually means. Meraglim means they're spies. I mean, on a pshat level, he's simply trying to get them agitated, to get them realizing that a shkacha purpose is working against them, as Yehuda points out later on, and to make the connection between what's going on with them, what happened to Yosef, and all that. It's part of the tshuva process, right? But there's all kinds of levels over here. And the Sefer Kabbalah Shalom, which I've mentioned before in the past, that Meraglim, in fact, it's a Rosh Tevus, which stands for Me'imi Rochel Ganavtam, L'Medyanim Yishmelim Machartim. Right? First letter of each of those words. Put them together, spells the word Meraglim. So Yosef is talking in codes, but that's an impossible code. Who would have thought, what does he mean by that? I don't know, let's think of what could mem stand for? Me'imi, that's a good one, right? That Rochel is mother, right? It's like, okay, it's true, it makes a lot of sense on some level. Maybe it would say that Ishmaya, or these people were Nevi'im anyhow, so they could have had Ruch HaKodesh, there's Zeicha to it, whatever. It's a nice vort, it's a great shot, but that's not the ikra over here. Right? So what does he mean by Meraglim? So the truth is, it's not quite clear, but the Arizal explains in perfect clarity exactly what he meant. He was warning them. He was telling them that you have to understand that the mistake that you made with me, the Jewish people will make in the future with Sion as well. Because whatever happens to me happens to them. And whatever you did to me, your descendants will do to Eretz Yisroel at the same time. The famous Medrash, where the Jewish people show up, they say to Kosh Baruch Hu, we want to see the land first. Kosh Baruch Hu said, I told them it's a beautiful land. I told them it's a fantastic place to do. You want to see the land? Right? So the Medrash is L'maha davar domeh, a princess who decides she wants to marry a commoner. There's nobody from the prince scene right now. They're all gaivadik, whatever reason. She wants to marry a down-to-earth commoner. So what does she do? She sends her guard out to look for the nicest, most clean-cut, well-behaved commoner she can possibly find. So it's completely breaking with tradition over here. But they do it. They go from house to house, knock at the door. They ask her and the townspeople, who's the nicest guy who might marry the princess? They find one person. And they go to him. And they see he's a nice guy working in the fields. He's a commoner, but that's what the princess wants. So they walk up and they say to him, the princess would like to have your hand in marriage. So to marry you. And he says, what? He says, yeah, the princess has decided she wants to marry a commoner, elevated from a lower status to become a prince, and your name keeps coming up. So will you marry the princess? He says something is wrong over here. Why would a princess marry a commoner? I want to see this princess. I want to meet the princess firsthand and see. Maybe she's missing, God forbid, a limb or something like that. She's like her head screwed on backwards. Who knows the situation? But princesses don't marry commoners. It's not normal. Well, I want to see what this princess looks like before I get myself into hot water. So they're shocked and they're surprised at how a person could even think like that. But they go back and speak to the princess. And the princess says, "What? What does he care?" And he says, "A chance to leave his lowly status, become a prince, and live in luxury and have children that'll be, so on and so forth from this point onward. I'll tell you what, bring him in. Tell him to come, right?" So they go back and they relay the message back to this commoner, who then goes about shaving and cleaning himself up and puts on his best clothing, Sunday clothing, or Shabbos clothing. But no, let's make a Sunday clothing instead, because it doesn't happen to us, these things. And he gets, comes to the palace, and they bring him into the princess's chambers, and he opens a door, and he sees this woman sitting at a table, dressed in black, wearing a black veil. Kilu, she's in mourning. And he thinks to himself, this is the princess? Are you kidding? No way, no how. I'd rather be a commoner. He excuses himself, he goes back to the fields and loses the opportunity. Really, she was a beautiful princess. Really, she was a nice person. That's the reason why she was made a commoner. But the black veil pulled over was a way of saying, this is what you get for being a little bit too curious, for not appreciating what you got as a gift in the first place. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, you want to come visit the land? You want to spy the land and see what it looks like? God, I made the world. I define what's good, what's not good. I can make the best thing in the world go like poof, and the worst thing in the world become fantastic. What are you asking over here? What do you want to see? What do you want to investigate? It's good enough that I'm giving you this fantastic gift. Don't look at the mouth and reject it over here. But they want to come anyhow. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, you want to come? Your free will choice. But he pulls a black veil over the land. And they look and say, this is what the land looks like. This is what it's all about. Forget it. It's not we don't want it. It's not for us. Kabbalistically, in the Zohar, it's much deeper than this, obviously. It's much deeper. It has to do with the spheres. In fact, Shlach has a whole different connotation in the Zohar. The Zohar says that Shlach means, because Baruch Hu said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you said for yourself. Because Moshe had a kasha. Moshe wanted to know. Moshe yearned to live in Eretz Yisroel. He yearned to cross the Yarden and turn over the Gezer against them and be Mashiach and be Matak in the world and finish things off the way they're supposed to be finished up. That was his whole desire. But Hakadosh Baruch Hu already foretold him it's not going to happen. Because the state of creation, not just as a punishment, because we see in Parashas Shlach that Moshe overrides the punishment. The Medrash says Hakadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, stop davening because you've already canceled the decree. I'm going to have to let you in if you daven a bit more. And if you go in, you'll build a base of Mikdash, and your base of Mikdash cannot be destroyed. And the Jewish people still will need punishment. So then it comes time later on to destroy either the base of Mikdash or them. And since the base of Mikdash can't be destroyed, I'll have to destroy them instead. So what's the choice? So Moshe says, I'm not going to destroy the Jewish people. It's not worth going into the Chas v'chila to destroy Klal Yisrael. So, Moshe knew that the only way to cross the Yarden was that the will was rectified. So it turns out it's very fascinating, and I was very, very tempted to bring it in and read it inside tonight, but it takes us too much time explanation to go through the different parts. But basically, it has to do with the fact that Eretz Yisrael is a certain darga, Moshe Rabbeinu is on a certain darga. The coming together of the two of them represents the rectification of levels of Sfirot, and the spies were sparks of Moshe Rabbeinu sent out by Moshe Rabbeinu specifically to create a certain tikkun necessary in the land to bring about the rectification of the Sfiros that would have allowed Moshe to cross the Yarden and go and fix the whole thing. So it's a whole complicated, much more detailed, and apparently that we call Zir Ampin, which is a Sfiros of Chesed through Yesod. It's a level of Yitzchayim, actually specifically the Yesod of that is called Yitzchayim, which Israel is in the level of Eitzadas Tov Hara, and bring together means rectifying everything, combining.
It's
it's a whole, it's a beautiful beautiful shot to look at and understand what's actually going on that level, because it gets much more of an appreciation of how things work historically on a deeper, more Kabbalistic level. But the upshot over here is that Yosef says to his brothers, he says, the fundamental mistake that you have made is you have misjudged me. Right? You saw something, and even though I'm your brother, and I come from our father, Yaakov Avinu, and you know that I probably mean well, you misjudged me, and you determined that I am dangerous for the future of Klal Yisrael. So you went ahead and actually broke halacha. I mean, you justified it by convenience and Sanhedrin. That's why later on, for example, and the consequences are far-reaching, because even though Caesars don't usually require an excuse to execute Jews, especially Gedolim, they do it all the time. They did it all the time. That this Caesar goes ahead and says, "What's the punishment for people who kidnapped their brother and never brought the trial?" Well, he makes the connection between what he's doing, what happened to Yosef and his brothers. Why? Why would that be necessary? Why is that part of our liturgy? Why do we recall that on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, the whole Maisa? Because we see the story of Yosef and his brothers is ongoing. It's an ongoing process of tikkun until the end of history, until Mashiach comes and brings concludes everything and rectifies the mistake that took place all the way back at the beginning. There's one thing we've been fixing the entire way through, and that is our perception. It's all about perception, which is based upon assumptions. Our assumptions determine our perceptions. So when Yosef stands before his brothers, and as the viceroy of Egypt, as the pasuk points out, he says he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. And it says it twice. And the Or Chaim, the Kaddish, points out and says, why does the pasuk go ahead and remind us a few psukim later that they did not recognize him? Because the first time, as the Gemara says, that when he left, it was only 17 years of age, and he didn't have a beard. Although the truth is, a beard does not change very much. Between 17 and 29, between 1 year old and 17 years of age, the face changes a lot. You won't recognize the person necessarily. But between 17 and 29, the face does not change that much at all. A beard will not take away the person's look. So either he was wearing lots of makeup and was all dressed up. Who knows what the reason was? But the second time they didn't recognize him, it was after he gave all these clues. And he said all these things to them, trying to indicate to them who he actually was. He's giving ramazim, he's leaving hints all over the place, as Yehuda says to his father, who criticizes him for saying, how could you possibly tell him you have another brother? And he says, because he knew everything. And Rashi points out, even that which our cribs were, the type of wood that our cribs were made from, that was a clue. I mean, Yaakov picks up on this. Yaakov realizes this must be Yosef down in Mitzrayim. This must be who's behind all this, and he starts to orchestrate a whole, process of tshuva with Yosef long distance through the brothers and the gifts and all that, fitting the entire, the numen of the scenario for the sake of bringing about tikkun for the Shvatim and for all Klal Yisrael. The second time it says it didn't recognize him, or Chaim says it because it wasn't even inside the intellectual vocabulary. It wasn't even there. They could not imagine how this could be Yosef, even though to us it's obvious because we know the story. But anybody who believed in Yosef's potential, anybody who saw behind the scenes and saw who Yosef really was, as Yaakov saw who Yosef really was, would have had the capacity to stand in front of him and say, this guy, I don't exactly understand what's going on over here. And I got a very suspicious, some kind of conspiracy. But I got to tell you, if I didn't know better, I'd say that was Yosef. I'm not saying it is. I can't confirm it just yet, right? But my suspicion, my hunch is because all that he's saying and all that's going on and all that's transpiring is a nightmare. It's a terrible, terrible nightmare. This whole thing is that it came to buy wheat and it's become a complete nightmare in the head. Now, how could that possibly happen? But who's the instrument? Which viceroy, which Egyptian would be the vehicle for all this? It can't be. It can't be. And you have to assume that there are other things going on in Yosef's court because he was a Jew. And the Egyptians stayed away from him to a large part. They didn't eat with him, as he points out. There must have been some kind of difference between him and the rest of them. There were little clues along the way to indicate that this could not be simply an Egyptian of power. He was leaving as many ramazim as possible, but it wasn't inside their intellectual vocabulary. So therefore, it was off the grid. It was off their intellectual grid. And they couldn't fathom, they couldn't see how it could be Yosef, and how this could be good for them, and how it was leading to Tikkun. Until finally he said, in the Yosef. And as we said before, a long time ago, it's a word that I once heard from HaShavua, of Nach Weinberg itself, but it makes perfect sense that that really the whole thing would have come to a conclusion in a happy way, and Mashiach would have come, and history would have unfolded at that moment in time and completed itself. The brothers have only got to the point where they could say, Ata Yosef.
Yeah,
Not forcing him to say, Ani Yosef. He has to say Ani Yosef because they're going to go to war. They just don't get the message. They just don't pick up on all the hints. They think it's do or die, and they're prepared to die. But Yosef is saying, come on, God, figure out who it is. They should have been able to say, Ata Yosef. And that was the tikkun. If they got to the point, just like, for example, on Yom Adin it says, because Baruch Hu said, Ani Hashem, and that's your din. Because Ani Hashem will mean that I appear to you over here, over here, over here, over here, all through your life. I was appearing to you and giving you hints. It was me to get you to tshuva and to wake up to realities, and not just that's just the postman. That's just the person behind the counter. What is that supposed to mean? Well, I can't mean anything important because that person only works in the Mizrah Panim. And what do they possibly know? You're right. You're right. They're not thinking, this guy could do tshuva somehow. So let me word, his passport such a way that, no, they're not thinking like that, because Baruch is thinking like that, and working through their emotions, and working through the responses, and working through the mouth of our enemies. When Obama says, we're going back to the 67 boys, that's not Obama talking. I mean, it's Obama talking, you pay for it. But it's Akash Baruch Hu talking to us. When Akash Baruch Hu says, or they say, Yerushalayim is on the chopping block, it's Akash Baruch Hu saying, Yerushalayim is on the chopping block. Why? Because if you guys don't wake up and realize what I've done for you, back in 1967 against fantastic odds, I gave you back the land, I gave you back Yerushalayim. Look at the pictures, go look at the movies. Look at the people who didn't even wear kippahs and how they felt when they walked up to the Kotel the first time after 1,000 of years. They could just go there and blow the shofar. Look at these things. And how many times have you gone to the Kotel in the last month? And when you go, how long do you stay? And what do you feel? Right? And what goes on there? On top of all that, it's like the way he talks to us this way. So the same thing. On Yom Adin, a tzaddik is somebody who goes there and says, before Kosh Baruch Hu can open his mouth, Hashem, he says, Ata Hashem. Because he saw Hashem. That's what makes a tzaddik a tzaddik. He sees Hashem everywhere in his life. Everywhere he goes, he sees a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So therefore he recognizes that, he does the tshuva, and responds to the moment appropriately. The rest of us, sleeping away. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Ni Hashem. Oh, wow, what a realization. Ani Yosef, they can't even speak. Because there's nothing to say. It's like we were totally duped. It's like the same way you feel. It turns out, it's like someone like a scandal, but they take your money and they bought something that the guy was honest, seemed perfectly legitimate. Turns out the guy was a fraud, disappeared. Your money's gone. There's nothing you can do, nothing you can say. It was a scam. Complete. You can be angry about it, but what are you going to say? They can't talk because everything they've done for 22 years has been a sheker. Has been a mistake. They were just a little bit wrong, by the way. They were completely wrong. Boy, did we miss the boat on Yosef. How could we be so wrong? We're tzaddikim, and we're running the Jewish people in the future of Klal Yisrael. How can we be so wrong? And that's what Yosef says, Maragli Mitem. That's you could be very wrong. Incredibly wrong. You could be leaders. Kasherim, you could be gedolim, but you can still be incredibly wrong if your assumptions are wrong. Because then your perceptions are wrong. It's a remarkable thing, the Jewish people, we won't go through the whole history, you can go back to the previous year and piece it together, the Holocaust, what's going on with the pogroms, what's going on everywhere, we pushed around, sent around. Every galus comes to the conclusion, it doesn't have to lead to another one. The Jewish people would wake up and realize what we're supposed to be doing, where we're supposed to be going, what we're supposed to be rectify. And it's an amazing thing today how little connection that some, not talking about people who are secular, who don't believe in Judaism, who don't believe in Torah, they're disconnected. Some maybe just even Erev Rav in the end. When I was back in the States this last trip, I read an article about some rabbi who called himself a Zionist, who was quoted as saying, had I been there in 1948, I would have voted against the state. He's a Zionist. He's a person who's a Zionist, right? Okay. Now we're really redefining, what the concept means. And a whole seminary or a place of teaching, rabbis to become leaders in Reform conservative community, and they're being taught basically to feel as much pain for the Palestinians' problem as the Jewish problem, if not more, in the end. Okay, the Erev Rav lives amongst us today. That's clear. But that issue aside, the main tikkun, kiratu of dechas of neya v'safrei chenenu. But there's no way you can love that if you don't understand. If you look at the chinuch in America specifically, but around the world for the last 50, 60, 70 years, there's been no focus in certain parts of Klal Yisrael. Other parts, there's been lots of focus. Not focus on other things in the end. But in terms of Eretz Yisrael, and everybody's got to fix up their own mess. And everybody has to come together and unify at some point in time, become part of Klal Yisrael. Right? And all these things have to be, all the issues have to be dealt with. But, standing back and examining the situation and looking through history, there's one chet specific, because Baruch Hu has been waiting to be rectified, going back to the time of the Morocco. Even the Egel Zahav was not enough for Kosh Baruch Hu to say, I'm going to destroy the Jewish people and build a nation just from you in the end. There's still room to rectify, get rid of the perpetrators, and Klal Yisrael was able to go weiter and still get to Israel. But the Meraglim, the rejection of the land, and Kosh Baruch Hu says in the end, it's not just a rejection of the land, it's a rejection of me in the end. Because Eretz Yisrael represents the only place the Jewish people can have a deep, ongoing relationship with Kosh Baruch Hu. It's the only place where our bitachon emunah can be tested, where you clearly see your survival depends upon Him. Whatever happens to you is directly connected to your relationship to Kosh Baruch Hu. Whether it's something, it's not a tzaddik, but this is Eretz Bitachon. This is Eretz Yisroel. It's a place that the Jew is transformed from a Yaakov to Yisrael. It's a place where a person is able to be samech on HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely and therefore show his trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the basis of the relationship. For thousands of years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been waiting year after year after year for Klal Yisrael to rectify and to mekayim the pasuk. Ki ratu of dechas of neha v'safraya chenenu. It all comes down to that. Just cherishing stones and wanting her dust, because that is the hinge point. And just to finish off with the Malbim, which is crucial because he really sums it up beautifully. He says at the end of history, Pasuk based on Yirmiyahu, he said at the end of history, the Jewish people will divide into two camps, and the Shibud Malchus finally comes to a close. Right, after thousands of years of the Jewish people being in oppression, from place one place another place, the last place you had millions of Jews being held captive because they were Jewish was Russia. When Russia imploded in the end of the 80s, and the Jewish people were allowed to emigrate and go other places wherever they went in the end, that was the end of the Shibud after thousands of years. There's no other place that Jews have been held captive en masse. Right, the exile is still going on because it's more of an intellectual problem, but the reality of Klal Yisrael, we left. And he says when that finally happens, and he's talking back in the 18th century, so to even comprehend the possibility was still quite premature. But he believed, and he said that one day it's going to happen. And he said when it does happen, a very bizarre thing is going to take place, and it was very bizarre at that time because Jews were very really respected and given government positions. Barbanel was a yachid, historically speaking. I mean, Jews were the money people because of all the bad connotations, but not like we have today, where the Jews literally have high positions of respect in different countries in the Western world. He said, but that's what's going to happen. The Sheba will come to an end, and the Gentile will finally turn to the Jewish people, and they'll stop killing them for the most part, and they'll give them positions. You'll be able to live next door to them and own banks and all, and even run for government. You'll be able to do it. He said, at that point in time, the Jewish people split into two camps, Yaakov and Yisrael. He says the Yaakov will be the Hamon Am. Says a little bit nice thing there as well about them, but he says they'll be the majority. They'll be the majority of the Jewish people because Yaakov is the Shem Begalus. And this large contingent will say, wow, after thousands of years, to have this type of respect and position and success, this, Kiman is Gula Shlema. Okay, I'm not shlema, but partly it's like certainly this is gula. This tastes wonderful. Must speak lanu. It's enough for us. And he says, but a smaller group of Klal Yisrael called Yisrael, because that's the name of the Jewish people in redemption, they will say, yeah, it's nice, it's a stepping stone, but it's not where it's at. It's not called Gula. It's not called Geula that the Jewish people go back to Israel as a nation, not just some of us, but the whole nation. It's called the nation. And the Beis Hamikdash comes back, the Shekhinah returns to the Beis Hamikdash, and we rectify the world. That's called Gula. And we, Malbim says, will go about trying to trigger this thing, this process. We'll go and carry it through. We'll move there and do whatever we can to bring it about. And of course, as the lesson points out, that will anger the Gentile world. They'll bring the world against us. It will cause all kinds of bayut because no one wants to get back. Just because there's a drachas, there's all kinds of ways to stop the gula. Because when we succeed, he fails in the end. He said, but in their schus, we suffer along the way. It's difficult. But in their schus, because they are makayim, the pasuk, he writes the dechas of Neah, they carry through. They're not satisfied until the gula comes to completion, and their schus, the geula shlema finally comes. And that's the group we want to belong to. And every year this parsha comes along to remind us, Shlach lecha, right? Send to yourself. It's about you guys. But all you individual Jews out there. Send for yourself. Shlach lecha. Don't look at me. It's not my job. And other things, lech lecha, that was my job. Shlach lecha, that's your job. You send out your own spies, like Yeshua does with Kalev, right? And Pinchas. And you see how you feel about the land. See which report comes back to your head, to your mind. But it's not going to be positive unless you put the proper assumptions in. First, go learn about what Eretz Yisroel means to the Jewish people and why you need it and why you require it and what history is all about. And then, when you take a look, it looks entirely different. You can become the pasuk and be part of the contingent in whose schus the gula finally comes. We should be zeicha to that.